Well, hello and welcome to another episode of More Perfect Marketing. It's David Baer here, and today we're going to talk a little bit about the connection that you, as a business owner, have with the folks that you're trying to connect with to become or to continue being your customers, clientele, patients, members, donors, whatever you may call them in your world. And a little bit about the humanization, the connection that you have the opportunity to bring to that relationship. Um, Helping me through this conversation is Nick Smith, who is joining me from the other end of the country in the Northeast in New Hampshire. Hey, Nick, welcome.
David, thank you for having me today.
We've just been having a lot of fun before we hit record, sort of talking a little bit about this concept and a little bit about your background and some of the work that you're doing. I even made a very sort of half joking comment about something on your website and the humanization aspect of that, and you actually went and like addressed it immediately, which I love because it demonstrates the kind of business leadership that you practice. Why don't we're going to get there eventually, but why don't we start from your beginning? You were not always in the marketing space. Why don't you give us a little bit of your history?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I suppose we could go way back to growing up. I was born to two entrepreneurial parents. My dad owned a restaurant in upstate New York, and my mom was in early childhood development education. So she ran some child care centers as well as the children's museum in our local town. And so I watched them, in their small business practice really, thrive in terms of putting together a great product, connecting with customers, having a great team and a great staff. But watching them try to learn the nuances of marketing from a child's perspective was interesting to see them go through those challenges. And so, fast forward to I'm 23 years old, newly married with a newly pregnant wife. I decide, you know what, I'm going to quit my stable job, my full-time gig, and I'm going to go chase after a passion of mine, which was to help people in the least church region of the United States, the Northeast, where less than 3% would say that they go to, a religious affiliated church on any given Sunday. And so at that time, my young family, we decided we'd drive out there and help this church that was doing this great work that they were doing. The only problem was they didn't have enough funds to pay us at the time. And I said, hey, no problem. I've watched my parents sell their whole lives. I had a friend of mine who was starting a software as a service company, and he said, I need a sales director. And I said, okay. And so I jumped in, and that kind of started my journey in marketing and in sales. And at that time, I was managing a team across multiple states while helping lead this church, which, in the least church region of the United States, it's not the most popular thing to go and sell Jesus door to door. But over time, we saw, a lot of people really responded to, the different approach to church and the different approach to addressing spiritual issues that were affecting their daily lives, and ended up becoming the fifth fastest growing church in America for a period of time. And so it was a incredible experience, just learning the human experience, having interactions on a daily basis, seeing people who had needs, who had aspirations and desires, and then seeing, ways that those could be fulfilled and watching their life change because of it. And really what happened was, in terms of transitioning out of the church space, out of the nonprofit space into the world that I live in today, I carried that empathetic leadership across the board, and it's really affected the way that I approach marketing, the way that our teams approach marketing. So for us, whether you're, talking to a parishioner at a church, or a patient from a doctor's office, or a patient who's using a therapy, every single, eyeball behind an audience, every single click, every single impression is connected to an actual person, a person who's looking to find purpose and fulfillment, who has a real problem that if you're marketing to, chances are you've got a solution to their needs. And so when we take that approach, we find that there's a much greater connection point between the brands that we work with and the clients that they serve, ultimately resulting in all the things that we all want to see more, which is, higher conversion rates, more appointments booked, more sales, and things of that nature. But Too often, I think it's easy for us as technologists and marketers to take a technology approach backwards and say, I know all the tools that I can implement. I've used all these strategies before. Let's get to work. As opposed to thinking, if I was really sitting in this person's shoes, how would I feel? What would I be desiring? What would I want to happen? And, what are the steps that we can help them take to get there? So instead of a hard, sales approach, more of a consultative service approach where we're saying, how do we transfer trust, earn the trust of the consumer by understanding their needs so well that they're ready to trust us to take that next step and make a buying decision?
There is so much in what you just shared. I want to circle back on a couple of things that I heard you talk about. You made a comment about technologists and marketers, and one of the things that I think both you and I are surrounded by with other folks in our industry are people who are really, really, really good at using one channel or one technology or one medium when it comes to marketing, but don't really appreciate the role that that plays in the work that they're doing for the client's overall business, for example. And so I really appreciate the fact that you brought that up in terms of a category of what exists in our space. The other thing that I want to circle back to, and this is really, I think, it sounds I don't know, sort of trite to say, well, people do business with people they know, like, and trust. But embedded in everything that you said, right, that is really at the core of how many businesses, particularly businesses on a local level, tend to operate. And so I see that coming through in some of the stuff that you're doing on behalf of clients and that you're doing in your own business as well. And it's informed, I think, a great deal by that history that you shared of working in the church with communities and making connection person to person in a way that maybe the traditional, perception of what church or organized religion might have otherwise been to those individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, using the foundational piece of sales as just a transfer of trust. One of the biggest problems that happens if you're a small business owner making a scalable move into maybe digital sales or omni-channel sales, we talk to a lot of business owners who say, how I attract my customers and how I get them is, through word of mouth and through an in-person meeting and through a handshake. And the reality is it's that process that you're trying to replicate. It just gets messy when you start doing it digitally. And if you go, Sun Tzu said, tactics before strategy is the noise before defeat. And so if you put the cart before the horse and you are running tactics, you actually have a higher probability of hurting your brand's reputation and the perception of your company because, these tactics, they don't resonate necessarily with the client. It's not as well thought out and it becomes clunky. And so I almost like to think of it as, you've got a couple of different audience types or customers, probably within your market basket share, within your mix of audiences, right? And so you would approach a sales conversation with one person drastically different than you would another person. Maybe it could even be just on a gender basis. You may have a different tonality and different approach to a female than you would a male, or a person of a different age group, or a person of a different buying potential, lifetime value. All of those things would play into how you would interact with that person in an in-person sales meeting. And so when we take out the in-person portion and we think about how do we systematize, processes that allow us to have sales that's happening all the time, we have to keep that same level of intentionality. How do we, in fact, we have to go a step further to make sure that we're going above and beyond to put the right message to the right person at the right time. None of us really have a problem when we're served an advertisement and we make a purchase from it. In fact, after we see an advertisement and we make a purchase from it, we're usually glad because we got something that's going to enhance our lives or fill our needs. And that's a good thing. But we all get frustrated when we see advertisements that have nothing to do with us, that don't, relate at all to our needs or the desires that we have. And you can tell that it was just kind of sloppy. And so the intentionality by which you install these tactics, install these, processes are really, really important. And making sure that you're holding on and pressing the lever of gaining trust, gaining, that one-to-one connection making sure that you're talking about how you can increase the perceived likelihood of achievement of whatever it is that you're selling for your customer early on. It's tactics like that, or strategies like that, rather, that when they're baked into your tactics, really allow for you to have an omni-channel process that's selling just as good as maybe your in-person sales, field team members.
Yeah. Let's go one further. I mean, there's the ads that are misaligned to somebody's, whoever they are, whether it's an ad that's showing up on Facebook that has nothing to do with any of your interests, and therefore the targeting of the ad for the subject was wrong. But what's, I think, even worse, and happens a lot, is an ad for something that is a fit. It solves a problem I have, but it is communicated in a way that, for me as an individual, doesn't resonate. And so the finding the right way to talk, as the business, to the right audience in the right demeanor, right tone, and that's often a mismatch as well.
Absolutely. And you really are hitting on the points of the importance of value messaging, of creating value narratives, creating offers and approaches, doing social listening to understand what words resonate most with the target audiences that you're talking to, and actually making a change. So many people take a bulleted approach, or a shotgun approach rather, to their marketing efforts, and they say, this is our competitive advantage, this is our value statement, and then they blast it everywhere. But value is perceived differently by different stakeholders. And so what's valuable to one person may not be valuable to somebody else, depending on where they're at in your buyer's cycle, depending on where they're at in your marketing funnel. And so there should be a lot of focus on segmenting your marketing. Just like, I think the illustration is, if you could imagine sitting down at your desk, and every type of customer that you have walks in and sits down, if you could write down every way that you changed your pitch, every way that you changed your buyer's communication sequencing, from how they asked an objection in one way but the other customer didn't, or this person has a positive position towards your brand, and so you knew the sale was going to be easy and you're actually trying to push them towards advocacy, versus someone who comes in and has a negative perception towards the brand, and so you're handling information and providing information to them differently. And so that's that level of intentionality that really needs to go into your marketing and into your sales collateral as you start to go beyond just a single channel. Again, most single channels tend to be in the small business, medium-sized business realm, tend to be an in-person account director or an in-person salesperson. And so as you go just beyond that, or as you start to automate some of those communication sequences, so you can start putting 10, 20 hours a week back into your administrator's time or back into your sales team's time, you want to make sure that you're really paying close attention to the messaging that you're crafting, the sequence touch points as to when they're actually triggered, when the users are going to get them, and all of the terminology within it, to make sure that it makes the right message to the right person at the right time.
I love the layers that you're talking about in terms of how to approach this, and to take a look at what you're currently doing and how it differs from one person to another, one audience, potential customer, client, or patient to another, etc. Because it's not something that most businesses, big or small, certainly not small, tend to do. And so let's talk a little bit about the work that you're doing, and where you start to connect with clients. At your company, your agency, Loud Canvas, you are proudly East Coast centric, right? So you are making a statement there, right? I'm out here in Portland, Oregon. I'm not going to hire you. Why? Because you have dissed me. I'm sorry. You've impressed me, but your website says East Coast, right? So I
Sure.
automatically make a connection. Now, that was in jest, for those of you who don't know my sense of humor. You automatically make a connection, an affinity, just around that first thing, right? So that brings people in. But what are people who are in leadership roles or ownership roles in a business struggling with, that they're going to come to you? And then what does that look like in your world as you're sort of walking through I see you have a problem, here's how we can address that problem, and here's the path to the solution?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when I transitioned out of the work that I was doing in the nonprofit space in the church world, I transitioned into a traditional agency world, and the agency world that I landed in was one of the largest pharmaceutical agencies in the world. And so right away, I got to learn a whole new industry. I got to learn how marketing was applied, again, not to parishioners, but now to patients and to payers and to healthcare providers. But in that process, I also got to see all of the access to marketing tools and technologies and strategies that, as I look back as a kid, my parents were missing out on. And so as president of Loud Canvas Media, we've started an initiative that we call From Madison to Main, or Madison Avenue to Main Street America. And the idea behind that is that we're taking, the Madison Avenue's proven best strategies, best tools, and we're making it accessible to small and medium-sized businesses, to your mom and pops that you know and love on Main Street America. And so, in that kind of process, we now have the ability to provide the tools that the largest brands in the world, the ones that you see on TV, are utilizing, right to your favorite mom and pop. It's really important because it allows for the business owner to see that there's a trajectory of growth in a proven system that's worked before. And these large brands, these Madison Avenue brands, or these Forbes 100, Forbes top 10 brands, these brands are spending a lot of money researching these strategies, investing a lot of money utilizing these tactics. And the small business owners and the medium-sized business owners are the ones that have the ability to gain on that, because they can now use that knowledge, use the research and development that's taken place, and apply it where applicable, to their business use cases. So, the first thing that we do, like we talked about, is strategy. We're always taking a look at where are you now, where are you trying to go, making connections with others who might be in your industry, who might be a step ahead of you, a little bit further along, so that way you can learn, find some collaboration and some mentorship. But then we're just piecing it together, understanding if your goals and your strategic imperatives are aligned by all of your internal stakeholders, then we'll have the plan in place to help you to accomplish those. We find ourselves right in the middle of the market. And so we like to say that if you're a customer that's looking for marketing, communications, technology, then you're forced with a decision to make. You can either choose a conglomerate agency, a big agency that's backed by venture capital, and they're going to charge you every time an email comes through, and 15-minute increments, and for every single person who shows up on the meeting with you, right? It becomes very costly and difficult for brands to scale. On the other side, you might find yourself going with a specialized boutique agency who might be able to give you specialized services in one way or another, for instance, maybe creative or development, but they don't have the full services ready to help you scale and grow or navigate the complexities of your industry. And so that's why we've positioned ourselves right there in the middle. We've got all the talent that's required to navigate the most complex issues in your industry without the overhead and the costs that come from those big conglomerate agencies. So I think, in terms of finding your tribe and beating that drum, and your friends will come. When we talk about being an East Coast agency, Teddy Roosevelt said, by far and away, the best prize that life has to offer is work worth doing. And we like to say that it's not just work worth doing, but it's people worth doing it with. Mm-hmm. And so the majority of our creative team is located here on the East Coast. It influences some of the creative vibes that you see in some of our direct-to-consumer brands. We also have a local strategic business unit where we only work with local small businesses and medium-sized businesses, as well as our Loud Canvas Health and our industrial traffic clients, which are some of the largest brands in the world. So yeah, that's a little bit about kind of why we position ourselves that way, how we help small businesses become that Madison Avenue business over time and become a good marketing partner, a good scaling partner for them, and also what keeps our creatives really excited and going to work. Behind every creative ad that goes out, behind every strategic campaign that's put out, is a group of people who are working and who are creative to put that out there. We want to keep them happy and excited about the work that they're doing.
Yeah. This is only a half-hour podcast, and so I want to point out, and you'll agree, that there's a lot of nuance to how much you can actually take from enterprise marketing and apply to small business. First, economic considerations, like we don't have the budget to do exactly what they're doing, but also the type of marketing that often happens in a larger organization. And if you think about, you reference Mad Men on your website when you talk about the Madison to Maine concept, which I love, by the way, both the concept and Mad Men. you referenced the idea of, taking these Madison Avenue agency concepts, and I would argue that, to a certain extent, that traditional approach has been very much about brand more than direct response, getting people to take action, which is, a lot more guided and a lot more efficient for a smaller operation with a smaller budget. And often brand itself is not the starting place, but maybe the ending reinforcement for a smaller budget and a smaller business. So uh, I'll leave it there. You can comment on any of that you want, but we could spend 4 or 5 hours digging into all of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, just having a roadmap and a game plan is the most important thing for kind of making accessible these Madison Avenue strategies for Main Street America. And so just by having the knowledge of saying, okay, you're in this stage of your growth, here are the challenges that you're typically facing within this revenue per year mark. In order to get to this next stage, you're going to have to scale your operations, which means you're going to have to go through standard operating procedures, right? And so there's a lot of business consulting that comes along with that. But just having the knowledge and having a partner there to help walk you through it, I think is half the battle. That'd be the first part. The second part, I think, is the beautiful thing about technology is that the more adoption that happens, the cheaper the prices become. And so whereas 10 or 15 years ago, in order to have a CRM system that allowed you to automate segmentation marketing, and identify your customers and communicate with them without having to actually pick up your phone and do it yourself consistently, you had to have a Salesforce installation, which costs you quite a few hundreds of thousands of dollars in licensing and development. But on this mission that we've been on, we were able to entirely replace Salesforce as an offering for a hundredth of the cost for our clients. And so that's just one way of knowing, hey, when you know what it is that's necessary and you know the steps that you need to get there, you can start to find ways to accomplish it at higher efficiencies.
And I think, on top of that wasn't the example I was thinking of when you were talking about access to technologies, but it's a really good one. I was thinking about the fact that small businesses have access to data and targeting capabilities, for example, that was very much the exclusive space of major enterprise organizations with deep pocket, Madison Avenue agencies. But when we had Google and Facebook, which is now Meta, and the ability to do the kind of geofence type targeting and all of that, which is so accessible price wise these days, we have so much more that we can do for a smaller budget than we ever did before.
That's exactly right. Yeah, making sure that you're getting the best bang for your buck, making sure that you've got a measurement strategy that shows you the ability to quantify, qualify, and compare your efforts. So that way you're ensuring your return on your marketing efforts are there, your return on investment is there, is crucial. And you're absolutely right. The dollar, the pound for the dollar for pound that you're getting is much higher nowadays in terms of technology. And the data sets are extremely rich when you're dealing with a small local direct to consumer. One of my favorite markets right now is your small service industries, whether it be your salons, your med spas, your roofers, your construction workers, your carpet cleaners, the home service industry, pest control. Your home service industry is ripe for efficiencies through simple automation of a CRM system.
Yeah.
That so many of them just haven't adapted quite yet.
And those are as well getting much more accessible as well. So you mentioned Salesforce, but of course on the higher end enterprise level, there's a lot of deep pocket kind of tools that require the same sort of scenario you were talking about earlier. If you had a HubSpot installation in the past, you would be paying a pretty penny for the internal advisor at HubSpot, and these days, it's not just Infusionsoft or now Keep and all of their followers, but Go High Level and all kinds of other tools that are super affordable for small organizations. So the
That's
ability
exactly right.
to customize all of that to a particular industry, and home service is a great place, to sort of use as an example for that. I want to, we have just a few minutes left, circle back to where we started in terms of this idea of the way that humans and humans interact with one another, and how that plays into a lot of what we've been talking about in terms of the technology and capabilities, and the channels where these communications happen. You were comparing this earlier to the one-on-one conversations that you have, and how do you apply that in the digital environment? So I'll ask you, how do you apply it in the digital environment?
Yeah, it's like how you eat an elephant, right? Bite-sized pieces,
It's,
bite-sized pieces, and with an empathetic approach. Uh, Again, I keep harping on this idea of sales as being a transfer of trust, but the reality is all we're doing is trying to help somebody make a buying decision. And when you care more about helping make somebody a buying decision, even if they're not ready to buy from you, then you're earning their trust, and over time, what that turns into is a transfer of dollars and cents as well. And so, from an acute perspective, you start by documenting and understanding what are the interactions that you have, and what are the nuances between, or the differences between those interactions based off of the customer that you're talking to.
yeah.
Once you've documented that, then you need to think through, how is this contextualized, or how is this applicable in a technology mindset or in a reproducible mindset? That could be with messaging, it could be with color theory, it could be, with offer and approach.
Could you guide us through an example of whether this is a real client or something that's fictitious, of what that actually looks like?
Sure. So, there's a very large certification company that we work with, global certification company that helps to certify a specialty. Uh, let's say, be careful here, but they certify healthcare professionals in certain specialties for a particular at bedside procedure.
Okay.
We'll leave it at that. But the reality is that their target audience is very large. It's made up of physicians and sonographers and midwives. It's made up of nurse practitioners, practitioners assistants, and they're offering certifications, different types of certifications. And so naturally, there's going to be certain certifications that make sense based off of a certain career path, or based off of a category or a specialization. So, in order to actually see that in a full omni-channel campaign, the first thing that you need to do is you need to diagram and understand what all the relevant points are, what all the relevant sale points are, what all the main converting points are in the buyer cycle. And then you need to contextualize the message around it, because a physician has a different worldview and a different mindset than a midwife does. Right. And so whether it's the reading level, comprehension level that the message of the ad says, or that the landing page has, or the email has, or the text message, it might even be the modality that we're delivering the information. One may prefer a cell phone, voicemail sent right to them versus a text message, while the other might prefer to have information, in a more traditional manner sent to them in the actual mail. Every single one of those pieces really plays into how well is this going to pull through, how effective is this marketing effort going to be towards reaching my goal of, in this case, increasing certifications or increasing sales. And the reality is if you could walk to every single one of those potential customers and have a one-to-one conversation, your pull through would probably be much, much, much higher. And so mimicking those interactions and those nuances within your messaging sequence, within the creative that you select, within the follow-up sequence, the way that you provide the modality of information, all of those things play a critical part in, what is your final conversion rate. A lot of times people think, how many impressions did I have? How many click-throughs did I have? How many sales did I have?
Yeah.
Well, what was the tonality of the messaging? What was the reading level of the messaging? What was the feel, the look and feel of the advertising? What was the amount of frequencies of touch points that happened in between? What was the offer? What was the approach? What was the social proof? What was the perceived likelihood of achievement? All of those things play into your conversion rate. And unless you start to break down all of those steps, have a measurement plan so that way you can easily see those KPIs and then make adjustments based off of your feedback, based off of what you're learning, you won't see optimizations in your conversion rate.
I love it. There's there's a couple of answers that I like to hear from marketing professionals when they're asked questions like, you know, are these good numbers or these bad numbers? And you just described, the type of answer that somebody ought to be giving. The other question that I love hearing from marketers is when somebody says, "Is this going to work?" And the answer should be something like, "I don't know, but we're going to test it and find out." Right. So I have a feeling that's the type of answer that Nick Smith would give.
We value partnerships so much. If a client comes to us and says, "Hey, we want it to be set it and forget it, and we don't want to give you any information, and good luck, and just make something award winning," the best award winning works. If you're setting out to do great work, then you want to have great partners who are going to collaborate and be there with you. And especially when you're looking at omni-channel efforts, you have to know that this is a much more of a fact-finding mission than it is a sure bet. And you have to be willing to do the testing that's required, the research and development, the live testing that's required on your audiences in order to have the feedback required to truly optimize and make it the best that it can possibly be.
So if folks have been listening and they want to hear more from you and get deeper into your perspective on marketing and improving whatever their business goals may be, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me at loudcanvas.com. There's a chat bubble there at the bottom right-hand side. Send me a message. I'd love to have a conversation with you. We're offering free audits for business owners. So we'll do a full 80-page SWOT analysis, competitor analysis, audience consumption analysis. And you could have that within a 24-hour time frame if you just come over to loudcanvas.com and let me know you're interested.
Fantastic. Well, that's Nick Smith from Loud Canvas Media. Thank you so much for spending time with us. Really appreciate it.
David, thanks for having me.
Indeed. Folks, you've been listening to More Perfect Marketing. If you know somebody who could benefit from listening to the conversation you just heard, please share this with them. Until next time, I'm David Baer. Take care.